Hello, you're watching Context. I'm Orkan Amashov here to ask relevant and pertinent questions in pursuit of elucidating and illuminating answers. Although there appears to be substantial concurrence between the administration in Washington and the government of Benjamin Netanyahu on the matter of Iran, the same cannot be said regarding the state of Gaza ceasefire negotiations, the likelihood of an agreement or the fate of the hostages. What is quite clear at this juncture is that the talks between Israel and Hamas held in Doha are facing formidable challenges. According to some reports, particularly those close to Hamas, the negotiations are actually on the verge of collapse. The dominant narrative on the Palestinian side is that Israel is deliberately stalling the process. It is claimed that the Israeli delegation dispatched to Doha lacks the necessary authority to make decisions on critical matters at the heart of the current discussions. But chief among these unresolved issues that are to be resolved are the withdrawal of Israeli troops from Gaza and the distribution of humanitarian aid, and there are some other elements ingrained at the heart of the discussions as well. Well, the talk described as indirect proximity negotiations have been facilitated by Qatar's Prime Minister and senior Egyptian intelligence officials with the participation of US diplomats ensured as well. Yet, of course, mutual accusations of sabotage, mutually exclusive claims and counterclaims have become something of a hallmark of the ceasefire discourse over the past few months. And this cycle of impasse continues. And this is very sad that this is a reality, that this process is still underway and that the major sticking points have not been resolved. But also, sadly, it is not at all surprising. What remains both unsurprising and profoundly tragic is a state of the humanitarian situation on the ground, which continues to deteriorate at an alarming pace. The reality, which, by the way, is accepted and acknowledged by both sides, and including Israel as well. And joining us now from Paris is Ilan Sialom, a researcher in geopolitics whose expertise is quite wide-ranging, and it includes the areas such as the cyber security as well. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, sir.
Thank you very much.
Well, first of all, before asking about the major sticking points that lie at the heart of the discussions between Israel and Hamas in Doha, I would like to ask about the international urgency. Bearing in mind the reports coming from Gaza, they are issued by Hamas-controlled Gaza Health Ministry, of course, but they seem to suggest that over the past 24 hours, 130 bodies have been received by the Palestinian hospital, by the Hamas-run hospital. And do you believe that the sheer scale of the humanitarian catastrophe, which seems to have been escalating with absolutely no let-up, could actually potentially catalyze renewed negotiations? And what do you make of the international urgency in particular? And then we will move to the sticking points later.
Well, thank you very much for your question. I think there is no doubt that the humanitarian situation in Gaza is catastrophic, and reports from medical teams and aid organizations describe collapsing infrastructure, critical shortages, and widespread displacement. We know that very well. And there are as well specific incidents, especially when the distribution aid is happening, and it has further heightened alarm. That said, I think that we should remain cautious when interpreting raw casualties figures. We are in a conflict of important intensity, and in this type of conflict, the numbers are often politicized, used strategically to reinforce competing narratives. But even without focusing on exact data, I think the scale of human suffering for sure is undeniable, and it's pushing key mediators, as you say, the US, Egypt, and Qatar, to intensify their efforts behind the scenes. So will that force a breakthrough? Not necessarily. Humanitarian urgency has low impact on talks right now, and unless core demands shift on both sides, the political deadlock will likely persist.
Thank you very much indeed. And let's now talk about the subject matter of the negotiation. There are a number of issues there. There's a question of the distribution of humanitarian aid. We know that Israelis are effectively saying that this should be done by a US-Israel affiliated humanitarian organization. There are some other issues. Amongst the issues that we have there, also including the Israeli withdrawal from Gaza and others, what is the most important issue which needs to be resolved now in order for that breakthrough, or what we may tentatively call breakthrough, to be attained?
Well, I think today the negotiations in Doha are deadlocked on three major fronts. You talk about one, the humanitarian access, and Hamas and the UN has criticized the current aid distribution mechanism run by a US-backed foundation under Israeli army protection. He says it's unsafe and politically biased. So Israel defended it as a necessary safeguard against diversion of aid to militants. This is the first deadlock. The second one is the hostage ceasefire sequence. Hamas insists on a first commitment to end the war before releasing hostages. And Israel, by contrast, demands the hostages first and the dismantlement of Hamas military capacity before discussing a long-term ceasefire. And finally, which is the third deadlock, the territorial control. Hamas has rejected Israeli withdrawal maps that would leave around 40% of Gaza, including all of Rafah in the south, under Israeli military presence. They demand a return to the line held before Israel renewed offensive last March. So in short, I think these are not marginal disagreements. They reflect fundamental contradictions in how each side views the end of this war.
So three fundamental points of contention mentioned, referred to by you. The hostage release, the question of the territorial control, the way Israel needs to withdraw from Gaza, and also, of course, distribution of humanitarian aid.
Exactly.
What about the talks in Washington, D.C.? Do you think that the inclusion of a commitment to a permanent ceasefire still there as an indispensable component of the emerging framework? Because we know that on the basis of reports coming from Washington, US wants at a certain stage there to be a permanent ceasefire. This one is not a permanent ceasefire, but commitment to permanent ceasefire must be part of a temporary ceasefire. How do you evaluate the talks surrounding that inclusion?
Well, I think a permanent ceasefire is not viable as long as Israel's strategic objective remains the full dismantling of Hamas, military, administratively, and symbolically. So Prime Minister Netanyahu had made this unequivocal, repeatedly stating that the war ends only when Hamas no longer exists as a governing and combat force. So let's be clear, the Hamas could be reduced and major infrastructure of the organization has been totally eliminated, but the whole group, it definitely is not possible. But so this position as well is reinforced by the Trump administration and especially by the recent 12 days war against Iran, which you see full support of President Trump. So that alignment has solidified a doctrine of sustained pressure, not just against Iran, but against its proxies, including Hamas. So while we may see maybe short-term tactical pauses linked to hostage release or aid delivery, a durable ceasefire is unlikely unless a credible third-party governance model for Gaza emerges. Israel will keep operating and Hamas will try to survive long enough to claim symbolic victory.
That's very interesting. So you already replied to the question that I was literally thinking about to put to you. It's about the ultimate aim pursued by the government of Benjamin Netanyahu about achieving the total destruction of Hamas. Because the point about Hamas is one of some delicacy. I mean, many countries around the world treat it as a terrorist organization. It is a clear-cut objective for the current government in Israel to achieve its fundamental full-scale destruction. There are those who treat Hamas as an agent of the local population in Gaza, But bearing in mind that, that this remains a fundamental objective for Benjamin Netanyahu, to ensure that Hamas is completely destroyed and also taken out of the equation in Gaza, and bearing in mind that there seems to be no, at this stage, alternative, viable alternative to Hamas itself in Gaza, that any question about permanent ceasefire is a mere illusion. Would you agree with that?
Yes, fully. The future of Gaza depends on the absence of Hamas. It depends on the capacity of Arab states, especially UAE, Egypt, and probably Saudi Arabia, to push for a political solution and a new governance in the Gaza Strip. But up to now, we have a capacity to have a truce, a temporary truce, but it's not a long-term political plan that we are negotiating right now in Qatar.
It's also the nature of negotiations are incredibly interesting. I mean, it has been described, negotiations have been described as indirect proximity. They're not even talking to each other. They're actually in separate buildings, and Qatar is mediating between them. Top Egyptian officials involved in the process. Americans are present. It's not even a direct talk. It's an indirect talk, but within the same space, not far away from each other. I want you to reflect on the nature of the relationship between Benjamin Netanyahu and President Donald Trump. I mean, Iranians are saying that US foreign policy regarding Iran is completely shaped by Israeli priorities and sensibilities. What's about Gaza? To what extent do you think Benjamin Netanyahu is actually sort of influencing Trump's administration's policy in such a way that whatever America may formulate regarding Gaza, it still will be Israeli-centered?
Well, there are two parts in your question. The first one is the question of a relationship between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump. I will say that this relationship is one of deep strategic alignment and pragmatic calculation. Trump now is in the administration since, let's say, six months. US-Israeli coordination is more assertive than at any point in recent memory. The good example is the 12-day war against Iran. That campaign wasn't just tolerated by Washington, it was actively endorsed and politically framed as part of a shared doctrine of deterrence. This affects the Gaza conflict directly. Netanyahu operates today with political cover and strategic backing from a White House that views Hamas not just as a threat to Israel, but as part of a broader Iranian network to be dismantled. So Trump benefits in return by projecting power, decisiveness, and consistency in his Middle East policy. But, and it's very important to point that out, the relationship between the two leaders remain highly transactional. Today, the alliance is strong, not out of affection, but because their interests are aligned, their styles compatible, and their political survival mutually reinforcing. Now, if you talk about the way US policy in Gaza is detected or not by Israeli interest, I will say that there is a grain of truth when we talk about influence. But the claim, especially when it comes from Iranians, is overstated. It's undeniable that under Trump's second term, US policy has moved in near total alignment with Israeli priorities. But alignment is not subordination. The United States still weigh its own strategic calculation, including regional stability, great power competition, energy security, and so on. So there have been moments when US officials have slowed Israeli operation to secure humanitarian access or broker hostage deal. And I will say something maybe to be very short. America first is not Israeli first. In some, Israeli has influence, especially under this administration, but it doesn't dictate US policy. The relationship is asymmetrical, yes, but driven by strategic convergence, not blind obedience.
That's very interesting. And also, on the basis of Benjamin Netanyahu's latest trip and his talks with President Trump, What stands out as the main achievement of this trip, as long as Israeli interests are concerned?
I will say that, first of all, I think the main topic that has been discussed by Trump and Netanyahu was Iran. Yeah. To be sure that in the future, while we are still seeing what are the consequences of the 12 days war, will America support Israel in case of new strike on Iranian territory? Up to now, it seems that Trump is agreed to that, but it's not 100% support. As I said, Trump administration is based, and especially Trump himself is based on transaction. He wants to be sure that he has benefits, even when he talks with his biggest allies. Israel is one of his biggest ones. But even if they are very close in terms of strategy, the most important for Trump administration is to have political benefits. And if he has to say stop to Israel, he will do so. And
my last question, we talked about transactionalism, and you seem to believe, as many other analysts who are specializing in this particular field, that as long as Iran, United States dynamics are concerned, what happened, that one of US direct intervention that happened and that manifested itself in the shape and form of US actually striking those 3 nuclear sites, have also been beneficial from the point of view of US proving to the world at large that it's only power around the world which can actually deal with what is widely referred to as perceived Iranian threat, an Iranian nuclear threat. My last question to you, would it be fair to say, on the basis of what you said earlier about transactionalism, any other direct one-off US intervention in Israel-Iran conflict in the form of United States directly striking Iran, for the time being, is out of the question?
I think what we have seen is exceptional during this 12 days war. Yeah. Now we are coming back in another type of war, more secret, with specific operation, especially on the cyberspace. And the idea was to reduce the capacity, the Iranian capacity, both in the ballistic program and the nuclear program. But if tomorrow the diplomatic stage and the diplomatic way of dealing Iranian nuclear program is not working, we have seen it once. It can happen in the future as well. So now we are in a new sequence. The sequence is to reopen direct discussion between US and Iran. Now the question is how Israel will influence, according to its own security interest, the talks between Washington and Tehran.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Ilan Sialem. Thank you very much indeed for your analysis and for your very, very perceptive answers. So grateful to you.
Thank you very much.
That was Ilan Sialem, geopolitologist, researcher in geopolitics. With whom we discuss a wide range of issues, of course, the prospects of ceasefire in Gaza, which presently appear to be clouded by mistrust and competing narratives. And the latest reports coming from Doha seem to indicate that the negotiations are actually on the verge of a collapse. We also discussed the situation related to Benjamin Netanyahu's latest trip to Washington, and to what extent actually there is a publicly visible and perceptible concurrence between the government of Benjamin Netanyahu and the administration of President Donald Trump. Well, you've been watching A Context, and see you very soon indeed.